Sorry, everyone. Issues. I hope you bear with us. But I would like to say good evening to everyone and welcome. I'm Richard Kazami, president of the Old Astoria Neighborhood Association, also known as OANA. We're a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to improving quality of life, promoting responsible development, and making sure that every resident has a voice in shaping our community's future. Over the years, OANA has helped strengthen our neighborhood and Western Queens as a whole. We brought regular street cleaning back to Old Astoria, restoring a basic service that had been gone for years. We advocated for the Astoria Ferry Stop and its extension to the Upper East Side, giving our residences and businesses better access to the rest of the city. We've supported traffic and school safety improvements, making our streets safer for pedestrians, cyclists, and students. And we've championed initiatives that enhance quality of life, cultural vitality, and economic development. Building on that record, we're now advancing several new initiatives. The winter activation of Astoria Park, exploring seasonal rink and marketplaces to keep the park alive all year long. Upgrading dog facilities, including a permanent dog park in Hallett's Peninsula. And the Astoria Waterfront Arts District, linking artists, cultural institutions, small businesses to make Western Queens a true creative hub. Each of these projects also has an economic dimension. That's why later on, you'll be hearing from Ben Guttman, Executive Director of the Queens Economic Development Corporation. But first, we turn to a topic that may reshape how New York City governs itself, the 2025 New York City Charter Revision Commission ballot initiatives. These proposals could establish a new appeals panel made up of the mayor, council speaker, and borough president to review and potentially override certain city council land use decisions. To help us understand what's being proposed, we're joined by John Mangin of the 2025 Charter Revision Commission. John, if you could come in, greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Richard. I'm John Mangin. I'm the policy director for the 2025 Charter Revision Commission, and I'm here to walk you through some of the deliberations process and the questions themselves that the CRC forwarded to the ballot that you will see when you vote, starting on Saturday until Election Day on November 4th. Should I go into the presentation now, Richard?
I think it's a perfect time for it since we're a little running behind.
All right, then I'm going to share my screen here and we'll take it away. All right. Thanks again for the invitation. Let's dive right in. So the presentation tonight will cover 5 ballot questions that you will see on your ballot when you vote next week. The first question has something to do with like ski jumps upstate. It's a state question. The CRC didn't put it on there. I won't be addressing it tonight. I will, however, be talking about the next 5, 2 through 6, which create a fast track for affordable housing, that create a new expedited land use review procedure for certain categories of applications that ULURP doesn't work for today. Next, an affordable housing appeals board that, as Richard explained, for certain projects, including affordable housing, decisions of the council would be reviewable by an appeals board consisting of the mayor, the affected borough president, and the city council speaker. Next, consolidating and digitizing the city map. And finally, moving city elections from odd years, we're in an odd year now, to align them with even year presidential elections as an effort to increase turnout. And I'll dive in. Okay, so first, the Charter Revision Commission, constituted in late 2024, consists of 13 folks, many civic luminaries, chaired by Richard Bury. He's a former deputy mayor who got Universal Pre-K up and running, now the CEO of the Robin Hood Foundation. Carl Weisbrod, been a fixer in city government since the 1970s, lent his time and expertise. as well as many other folks in this with the past in city government or other aspects of city life, who in particular their expertise clusters around issues of housing, land use, and development in the city. The commission held 10 public hearings this year, 2 in each borough. We sat through probably 30 hours of testimony. 800 folks came, well over 100 testified, 3,000 written comments that we reviewed and published monthly. And the proposals that I'll share represent the commission's efforts to distill everything that they heard into a set of questions to address these pressing issues that were brought to the commission. The commission's focus, I would say there were 2. The housing crisis in New York City and the climate crisis and issues that it creates for our coastal areas. First, New York City, as many of you understand in a bone deep way, is suffering from an extreme housing shortage. We have the lowest vacancy rate since the 1960s. It drives all the things that we hate about the housing market, including gentrification and displacement pressures, including homelessness, including the fact that New York City, decades into the fair housing era, remains a very segregated place. All of this stems from the lack of housing choice, the lack of housing, the fact that tenants have no options, landlords have all the cards. It implicates bigger issues as well. We're on target to lose another 2 congressional seats, New York State, in the next census reapportionment. And that is in no small part to the fact that housing is so expensive here. There's not enough of it. And I can't tell you how many people that I know personally, probably people too, who have had to move to other parts of the country just to be able to afford a reasonable place to live. So that has consequences even on the national political stage as well. And the commission was very focused on these issues. I would say the commission paid close attention to a few different aspects of our current land use and development landscape. One, some parts of the city build a tremendous amount of housing and affordable housing. Some parts of the city built virtually none. In the last 10 years, 12 community districts produced as much housing as the other 39 combined, or the other 47 combined. Sorry, I was going on council districts there. Some community districts, some council districts produce hundreds and hundreds of affordable units per year on average. Others produce virtually none. And then you have zoning changes. That's the way that the city grows and changes over time, increases housing capacity, plans for future growth. Some parts of the city have seen a ton of land use applications. Your part of the city has seen a ton. Other parts of the city have seen virtually none. In hearing testimony about why that is, many folks like affordable housing developers like Kirk Goodrich, or Simon Bacchus, or Erica Keller explained that when they have access to a piece of land in the city, the first thing they do is say, okay, whose council district is it in? If it's in a district with a council member who you can talk to, who is willing to support growth and development, as your council members have been in recent years, then they can move forward. They can start having those conversations that could lead to affordable housing projects that help to address these issues around the housing crisis. If it's in a district where the council member absolutely says no, then they move on. They don't even bother to propose anything in the first place. And so what that current system leaves us with is just vast inequity, where certain neighborhoods are forced to accept the burdens of, the housing shortage. Certain neighborhoods see a ton of development, see a ton of ULURPs, see a ton of zoning changes, whereas other parts of the city are, stuck in time. And that was of great interest and importance to the commission. This was something that they wanted to figure out how to address. We heard from dozens and dozens and dozens of housing policy organizations across the city, and affordable housing organizations, affordable housing developers. And the Charter Revision Commission listened very carefully to the practitioners, to the people who are on the ground trying to do this stuff under the existing system. And we are very gratified that these groups are supportive of these changes that we are forwarding today. I personally, as policy director, am glad that we were able to listen to that testimony and convert it into something that, again, those people on the ground who are trying to work within the existing system said that they need in order to address some of the dire consequences of our housing shortage. Let's dive into some of the questions. First, I would say that the main thing that the commission heard around housing and land use was, we need a fast track for affordable housing. Now, that didn't always have a ton of specific content. People didn't always have specific proposals, but they said, it is crazy that affordable housing takes as much time and costs as much money to produce in this city as it does. Almost everybody agrees that this is something we want. Is there any way to make it easier? So there are two different fast tracks here. The first, a fast track action at the Board of Standards and Appeals. This is for publicly financed affordable housing. When HPD puts money in a project that's going to be 100% affordable housing project, it tends to be at very low incomes, low rents. Those are the projects that are with homeless set-asides that address the people in the direst needs. I think the most popular term sheet is ELA, extremely low and low income, which is 100% affordable at AMIs that reach down to 30% and times below. So, less than $1,000 in rent for a new construction two bedroom is not uncommon in those projects. For this type of project, instead of going to DCP and CPC, getting a rezoning, doing the environmental review for everything, going through 2 years or more of process at the other end, projects like this would be able to go directly to the BSA for project-specific approvals. They would be able to say, we need these changes to the zoning in order to make our project work. Here is why the project fits in with neighborhood character, which is one of the crucial findings. Here is our letter of support from HPD. They're committed to financing this project. Can you give us these very specific zoning waivers so we can achieve the project? So it's a much faster, much more targeted process than what we have today. I would say the most powerful moment of testimony for me was from a woman named Erica Keller, Brissa Builders, affordable housing developer. She wanted to build a project in Queens, an 100% affordable project in Queens. She needed a rezoning. She came to city planning. City planning said, well, you need to broaden your rezoning area so you have a rational map. Okay, that broadened rezoning area captured a parking lot. That had a lot of development potential. So we said, DCP said, that triggers a full environmental impact statement. Okay, that was another year delay, cost her almost $1 million to do that environmental review. She goes through ULURP, gets to council. They cut out all the non-applicant controlled sites anyway. So that extra year or two, that extra $1 million she spent was for nothing. And we wanted to create a system, the CRC, where that extra money could go towards more affordable housing or driving down rents in that affordable housing development rather than extra time and extra process. Now, the BSA, it's a 5-person body appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of the council, 1 member from each borough. These are folks who have expertise in the relevant areas here. They already do similar actions for similar types of projects. It just takes a lot more time. And so this the Charter Revision Commission wanted to figure out ways to streamline that. Next, affordable housing fast track for community districts that produce the least affordable housing. All credit to City Council. A couple years back, this Speaker Adams, created a fair housing framework that requires the city planning and HPD to create create housing targets for every single community district in the city around things like housing units, affordable housing units, senior housing units, supportive housing units, things like that, just as a part of an attempt to make that type of housing production more equitable. it passed unanimously in the council, and it was a great moment in recent housing history here. However, it doesn't have any enforcement mechanism. If we find, perhaps that the top 10 community districts produce 100 times more affordable housing than the bottom 10, that doesn't have any consequences in terms of how those projects would happen in the future. So the Charter Revision Commission was like, how can we give this fair housing framework teeth? And here's what they came up with. Every 5 years, city planning and HPD will assess affordable housing production in every single community district. And that's the rate of production, number of affordable units over the number of total housing units in that community district. Line them all up, rank them from first to last. The bottom 12 community districts would kick into this fast track procedure where projects that include affordable housing, at least mandatory inclusionary housing that includes a 25-30% set aside for income restricted housing, they would have access to this fast track procedure. What is it? The fast track procedure is 60 days at the community board and borough president. So concurrent review, 60 days community board, borough president, 30 days at the city planning commission, and then it's done and dusted. So only in those bottom 12, about the bottom fifth community districts that, under today's system produce virtually no affordable housing at all, would you have access to this fast track process. The commission would be mandated by the charter to assess, compliance with the fair housing framework, to assess adequacy of the city's capital strategy, and housing and infrastructure in the area for these types of developments. I mean, that's what the City Planning Commission basically does already. They're the body under the charter that does that. And so this would be an attempt to try to make affordable housing production a little more equitable, to try to enable it in the parts of the city where today, basically none of it happens at all. Make it a little fairer. We've heard, from various materials sent out that these fast tracks would give unilateral approval authority to the mayor. That's not right. The entities here who are charged with it are the BSA, are the CPC. These are entities created under the charter that do just this sort of thing. BSA, 5 members appointed by the mayor with advice and consent of council. It's an independent board. Their terms are specifically staggered so that they are not concurrent in any way with a mayoral administration, so that they can maintain a degree of independence to carry out their legal obligations. And of course, they're constrained legally in what they may do. This is not an entity that can just do whatever they want. They have to meet the findings. They have to operate within the structures of the law. CPC, 13 members, 12 of 13, are with the advice and consent of city council. 7 are appointed by the mayor, 1 each by the borough president, 1 by the public advocate. They have been around since the 1930s. This is what they do. They do planning. They assess appropriateness of land use actions. And so this is them just doing what they're supposed to do in those 12 community districts that, on a 5-year cycle produce basically no affordable housing at all. Okay, next. You've heard of ULURP, Uniform Land Use Review Procedure. This is ELURP, Expedited Land Use Review Procedure. This is intended to be a faster process that enables types of projects that simply do not happen under ULURP today. That may be projects that are too small. ULURP takes a long time. It costs a lot of money. When you see ULURPs, in Astoria, they're going to be to double or triple the capacity on those sites. Anything less doesn't provide enough upside to bear that time and that cost. Or, like I mentioned, there are parts of the city where, ULURP doesn't enable anything to happen because the local council member is completely opposed. So the commission carefully defined a few categories of projects that they thought would make sense for an expedited procedure. As it is, ULURP is one size fits all. It takes the same amount of time to, dispose of the property for Hudson Yards, do all the actions for Hudson Yards, as it does to, approve a small rezoning that extends a commercial overlay over a 20-foot wide lot or something like that. It's pretty wild. And so ULURP, we love it. It works fantastic for most things that you see today, but there are certain types of projects that can't happen under it. That includes modest increases in housing capacity, so modest rezonings in medium and high density districts or low density districts. We'll get to that. Dispositions and acquisitions for affordable housing. Why do we need to spend so much time doing these types of projects that everybody wants anyway? City map changes and other changes, approvals for resiliency infrastructure projects that today often just end up on the cutting room floor because they take so much time and so much money. I'll give a few examples in just a second. So first, modest increases in housing capacity. In the orange, those are medium and high density parts of New York City. Much of Astoria is in the orange, some in the blue as well. I personally went through the last 10 years of rezonings in New York City, and there were a big fat zero that increased residential capacity by less than 30%. That's a pretty good indication to me that ULURP is just too onerous to enable the types of modest changes that can enable neighborhoods to like grow and change organically over time. So when you see a ULURP, it's going to be a massive leap. Wouldn't it be great if we had some way to approve more modest changes when a massive leap might not be appropriate? So that's what this is intended to do. In the blue areas, low density areas, you would be able to rezone from any low density district to any other low density district. Low density districts max out at a standard height of 45 feet, FAR of 2 FAR. That's, so a building that's like twice the size of the lot that it's on. The biggest thing that gets developed today in low density areas is probably going to be like a 4-story apartment building, maybe even a walk up, that kind of thing, pretty modest type of housing. So those types of rezonings do not happen today either. Because again, if you're going to go through ULURP, if you're going to take all that time and all that money, you're going to take a big leap into, a medium and high density district. I completely understand why that creates anxiety for neighborhoods. Like big change is going to create bigger anxiety than a more modest type of change that enables neighborhoods to grow and change over time. So we've heard as well from some of the materials out there that ELURP housing projects will only deliver market rate housing. In fact, I'm one of the people who designed the mandatory inclusionary housing program 10 years ago. Under existing policy, mandatory inclusionary housing would apply to virtually every ELURP rezoning in medium and high density districts. There are a couple instances where you could conceivably do a rezoning that was just a 5% increase in capacity that would not trigger MIH, that would have universal affordability preference where you would still need affordable housing to max out your site. It's very unlikely that people would apply even for an ELURP rezoning of just a 5% increase. Again, you're not going to go through all that time and money and hassle, pay the consultants and everything like that for just a little single-digit % increase. But we think that ELURP will enable a type of increase that can't happen today, and it will be accompanied by mandatory inclusionary housing, contrary to what some people may have heard. Next, the climate crisis, the increased incidence of extreme weather, increased flooding, things like that were of great concern to the commission as well. And so we talked to all the agencies as well as many advocacy organizations around what types of changes we would need to make to land use procedure in order to make these types of projects easier. It stands to reason that existing process is not great for this. It dates to 1989, the last major charter revision. Nobody had heard of global warming. Nobody heard of climate change back then. In the decades since, this has become one of the biggest issues that we face. And so the commission wanted to update some of these land use procedures for that reality. So for instance, we heard a lot from DOT will be going in to do a state of good repair replacement of a road. It would make a ton of sense to elevate that a foot or two above flood elevation so that it didn't flood every time it rains or every time, there's high tide or whatever. Today, that would require a ULURP change to the city map that would take a couple of years, cost a ton of money, and would delay that project. And so a lot of times that doesn't happen. You just leave it on the table. Under this, something like that could go through ELURP. It could happen much faster. and create opportunities on the margin for resilience infrastructure as part of just state of good repair. Also, we heard from homeowners, individual homeowners in flood buyout zones that want to get out of harm's way, but would have to go through an entire ULURP in order for the city to acquire their single family home. These are people who want to get out of harm's way like yesterday. Who knows when the next big storm, next big flood is going to be. And we are asking individual homeowners to go through a full ULURP for that. So this would enable ELURP for 1 to 4 family homeowners for voluntary acquisition, voluntary flood buyouts in that situation in order to ease the burden on individual homeowners here. Leasing space on public land for solar panels. That's something that would be enabled through this expedited process. So things like that help us decarbonize, that help us acquire open space for flood protection, that enable us to do site selection or city map changes for flood protection projects. This can save years. This can save lots of money on these types of projects. What is ELURP? It's similar to the fast track I mentioned before. 60 days at community boards and borough president review, 30 days at city planning commission, and then you're done. So that's less than half the time that it takes today, and it'll cost a lot less money as well. So we were looking at ways to reduce process costs for projects like this so that we could get more of them. Next, Affordable Housing Appeals Board. This is part of the commission's effort to create pathways for affordable housing, in particular in parts of the city where it is just dead on arrival today. So this would propose to create an affordable housing appeals board for affordable housing projects only. You need to be at least MIH, mandatory inclusionary housing, 25-30% set aside to qualify for this. In that instance, if the city planning commission, or if the city council disapproves of that application, votes it down, or if they make modifications that constructively kill that project, the applicant or the appeals board would be able to call it up, and 2 out of 3 elected officials would be able to overturn that. That's the mayor, the speaker, and the affected borough president. And, like I was talking with Richard before we started today, we've talked to former folks who have worked on these processes, like former heads of city planning, city council land use and things like that, about what they would expect the effect of this to be. I don't think the Charter Revision Commission or anyone else really expects the Affordable Housing Appeals Board to have to do stuff all the time, to be overturning city council disapprovals and things like that. Rather, it's just a change to the structure that would enable city council to act more like the citywide body that it is supposed to be and get to yes on a wider variety of projects than it can get to yes to on today. Like I mentioned, today, there are any number of city council districts where the city council members have signaled entirely that they will not approve any rezoning. The Charter Revision Commission, in fact, we're facing a lawsuit right now from several city council members who do not even want these questions to go before the voters at all. And something like this, Affordable Housing Appeals Board, is a way to ensure that there is hope. If Kirk Goodrich or some other affordable housing developer wants to create a 100% affordable housing project in the district of a council member who is currently suing us to keep these questions off the ballot, that, they could talk to the borough president, they could talk to Donovan Richards, or they could talk to Antonio Reynoso and see if there is a pathway to support for 100% affordable projects in places where today they absolutely cannot happen. So here's a list of ranking of council districts by affordable housing production over the last 10 years. We have many districts where the average is less than 10 per year. I think about half of the council members on here are named petitioners on the lawsuit to keep these charter revision questions off the ballot. So you can see why something like this is necessary in order to open parts of the city that today are completely closed to development, and that put the pressure on neighborhoods like yours that do accept a lot of land use change, do accept a lot of housing today. So I think I've more or less explained how it works already, so we can skip over this. We've heard a lot, that this would interfere with the ability of council members to do community benefits agreements on projects. Note that community benefits agreements are by law outside of the land use process anyway. Affordable Housing Appeals Board can only touch the land use. So it's hard to say exactly how something like this would alter political dynamics around projects, but it's fair to say that it would create pathways for affordable housing where it does not exist today. And that's what the Charter Revision Commission wanted to do. Next, modernize and digitize the city map. If you can believe it, it's like the city is stuck in 1898 here when we consolidated. The city map, which shows all the official streets and parks in the city and is really important to certain types of infrastructure and housing projects. Sometimes in order to confirm something on the city map, you got to go to Kew Gardens and you got to look at canvas maps from the 1920s in order to figure out who has jurisdiction over something in the waterfront or how to do. That can add months. It can add a ton of time and money to projects. And so this question would consolidate the city map at city planning. It would digitize the city map. So it's totally online. And then it would go through ULURP in order to make that map the official city map. And things that today can take months, to just confirm jurisdiction, you'd be able to do, with the press of a button instantly. And I can't tell you how many practitioners, how many engineers who have to work on these projects were like, why didn't you guys do this like 100 years ago? Please make this happen. We have not gotten a lot of heat on this question. And so I don't need to spend a ton of time on it. Next, even year elections. So we have had declining turnout in mayoral elections, pretty precipitous since the late 60s, early 70s. We used to have over 80% turnout in mayoral elections. The last election was about 23%. What other jurisdictions around the country have found that if you synchronize local and federal elections, you will double or even triple your turnout overnight. That creates an electorate that's more reflective of the city as a whole, that enables more people to make their voices heard in these elections. And so we think it's an absolutely fantastic thing that's gotten near universal support. One extremely important thing to mention about this is in order to move elections to even years, it requires local action and state action. This would be the local action if this gets approved, putting the pressure on the state to make the state changes that would enable New York City to move its elections to even years. The state did that for the rest of the state a couple of years back. And so this would be basically a formal request for the state to do that for the city as well. So what are we doing now? Just public education. We're meeting with folks like you on these between now and election day. I'm having a great time doing it. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I think that's about all my allotted time. But I'll stick around for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Very comprehensive presentation. We greatly appreciate it. One thing I noticed here, one of the big issues we have locally here, beyond the fact that there is so much housing being done in community districts 1 and 2 and not that much in the rest of Queens. Also, we have an issue here with non-conforming properties. A lot of the industrial properties here, particularly in Old Astoria in the waterfront area, is all zoned for residential. And it's been an issue when a business or a warehouse or distribution company wants to expand. Again, they've been forced to go through ULURP, and I know of certain companies that have chose not to do that and actually moved out and moved into New Jersey or moved away from here. So that seems like an artificial impediment to economic growth, which makes no sense. So this ELURP procedure seems like that might be an interesting antidote to that. Considering the only other antidote I can think of might be a neighborhood rezoning, but that's really a difficult ask politically, financially, for a lot of reasons. That's not an easy process to go through. Look at what's going on with one LIC right now. So, I find that particularly interesting, and from our standpoint with OANA, I think a very good option to have.
No, I think it's very astute. It's a very good question. Mm-hmm. When people are thinking about the issues that they face in their neighborhoods, I always encourage folks to understand that as a product of things that are happening elsewhere in the city, elsewhere in the borough. You mentioned other parts of Queens, elsewhere in the city, even in the region. And so, the current system puts a lot of pressure on neighborhoods like yours that do accept development, that do accept zoning change. It puts pressure on some of the remaining spaces that we have for industrial uses in the city. For instance, it puts pressure on, the ability to set aside land as open space and parkland and things like that. So, this is all part of an effort to enable the city to create more housing in a wider variety of places. It sort of is almost a continuation of some of the efforts that you may be familiar with around City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, where we said, if we just are all in this together, if we ask every part of New York City to contribute, then we can have really big consequences. We can really take, a big bite out of the housing shortage without, dramatic change, without asking individual neighborhoods, many of which are either yours or not too far away from yours, to bear like a grossly disproportionate share of the burden. And so the last couple of years of efforts, including this, have really been an attempt to, make addressing our housing shortage a more equitable enterprise.
Yeah, thanks. A couple of things I want to mention to everybody, and I forgot to mention before, if anybody has any questions and in real time would like to have them answered, and you're watching on the stream on Facebook or YouTube, our software allows us to view or whatever you put in the chat. So if you put in Facebook chat or YouTube chat a question for who's ever presenting at that point, we will be able to see it and we'll be able to ask that question. So please utilize that. I think it's an important part because we need to create some dynamic in this discussion. And along those lines, to get that dynamic going, I'd like to bring out a panelist, the two panelists. The first would be Paris Strotter, who's the Assistant Commissioner of Planning and Development, and he's representing the City Council's perspective. He's the Assistant Commissioner of Planning and Development for the City Council. And then also we have Jeremy Parkin from Yes on Affordable Housing, who's representing our pro-reform position. And I'd like to ask John to stay with us. I'd like to have him during this sort of act as the referee, like you have in an NFL game, the guy that's out here to clarify factual and procedural aspects if it's needed. So thank you guys for all joining us. This is an important subject. What I'd like you to do, John and Paris, is if you give a couple minute introduction to yourself and the position that you have, and then we can go into a discussion between everybody as to what, how to address this situation. So, welcome.
Thank you. Jeremy, you want to go first, or you want me to go first? I guess I'm talking.
You go ahead. No, you're good. You're good. You go ahead. Yeah.
So thanks so much for the invitation. My title actually is Director of the Planning and Land Use Division here at City Council. I was an assistant commissioner when I was at the administration for HPD, and I worked a lot with John then. Have a lot of respect for John. Great guy. I actually met John. It's been almost, I think it was 16 years ago or something. But at City Council, my division staffs the Land Use Committee and the Zoning and Landmarks subcommittees. So we work on everything in terms of ULURP, but also we partner a lot with HPD, with city planning, and with some other agencies on various planning initiatives, and just serve as kind of technical assistance to the council members.
Great. And my name is Jeremy Parkin. I'm the political director for Yes on Affordable Housing, which is the campaign to pass ballot measures 2 through 5. My background is not in housing as much as some of the other folks on this call, so it's great to see you all here. But my background is in organizing and campaigns. Most recently, I was the organizing director for Brad Lander's campaign for mayor, Before that, I worked with the New York State United Teachers as the New York City and Long Island regional political organizer. And before that, I was the organizing director for Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for her 2020 and 2022 re-elections. It's wonderful to be here.
What I'd like to do also, you presented yourselves, but how about a little bit about your positions and what you want to present and bring to the audience in regards to these ballot initiatives? If you could give a brief summary of that, and then we can go into specific questions. And even if you have questions for each other, I think that would help things also.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, Jeremy, why don't you go first? Because you kind of follow John, and that's
sure. So yeah, I mean, our position is that these ballot proposals will be a fantastic first step in trying to alleviate some of the housing crisis here in the city. John said it all much better than I can, but some of the stats are quite damning. I mean, we are in a 1.4% vacancy rate here in the city right now. That means that 98.6% of units, whether they're affordable or market rate, are full. That gives a tremendous amount of power to landlords in order to raise rents and charge whatever they want when there's not many other places to go. Now, I won't sit here and say that I think that building housing is the only solution out of the housing crisis. I think it's part of it. We have to pair that with tenant protections, eviction protections, all kinds of good stuff. But one area that we just simply don't have enough in is housing stock. And being able to build more affordable housing quicker would be a really great thing in helping us take the first step at chipping away at the housing crisis. Just a word on some of the support that I'm representing here tonight. Our coalition is about 60 different organizations from groups like Open New York, as well as groups like Vocal New York, Chaya CDC. So we're a big mix of like pro-housing organizations, affordable housing developers, good government groups, but there's a part of our coalition I always really like to highlight, which is homelessness and supportive housing services. So we have groups like Homeless Services United, Services for the Underserved, Vocal New York, which I mentioned, and the Ali Forney Center, which are all organizations that deal with at-risk youth, unhoused people, elders, and people that are returning citizens from jails and prisons who need long-term places to stay. These ballot proposals would be amazing for these organizations because, as folks have probably seen, we have a homelessness crisis in New York City. A lot of that is driven by the affordable housing crisis, but whenever people propose a homeless shelter, you tend to see a lot of backlash to that. And that makes it very politically difficult for people to approve those homeless shelters sometimes. And so being able to fast track that kind of stuff will go a long way in terms of making sure that we're getting supportive housing and homeless services where they're needed the most. We also have some support from elected officials. Comptroller Brad Lander has endorsed these proposals. So has Donovan Richards, the Queensborough president, as well as Mark Levine, the Manhattan Borough president, and Antonio Reynoso, who's the Brooklyn Borough president. So a lot of wide-ranging support here, all unified around the idea that these are a great first step in helping to alleviate the housing crisis, and particularly to help with our homelessness and supportive housing needs too.
Good. Thank you. And Paris.
Yeah. So the city council agrees with a lot of what the administration has said, and of course what the commission is saying. We're certainly in a housing crisis. It's partially why we passed the fair housing legislation a couple of years ago. We agree with the concept of, expediting to the extent possible affordable housing and expediting minor changes in development or density. Our concerns about this proposal really are about a couple things. One, the way that affordable is defined in these proposals is not what we consider affordable. Two, that sometimes minor relief in certain areas means major changes to certain neighborhoods, particularly low income, moderate income, Black and brown neighborhoods like Brownsville, Crown Heights, parts of the Bronx, Harlem, and parts of Queens. Basically where you have a mismatch between what's built, which is low scale homes, and then zoning, which is up here. So when you think about a minor increase in density, actually means a major change to those areas, and those folks won't really have a say via their local council member. Another thing that we're concerned of related to that is that the City Planning Commission doesn't really act like a body that negotiates and kind of crafts projects. They do make modifications to certain ULURPs, but they've approved all but a couple applications in the last 15 years. So I don't even need two hands to show how many denials there's been from the City Planning Commission over the last 10 years. So those are some of our concerns. In terms of affordable, so if you look at the law in terms of what can qualify for the BSA, the law does not define what affordable is. So in neighborhoods that are low income, an affordable project could really be a market rate project. There's no definition of affordable. I know the intention is for 100% kind of publicly subsidized projects. There's not a requirement for any percentage. It just says it has to be partly affordable. And as it relates to subsidy, there's no requirement in the law for those projects to be subsidized as a requirement for it to go to the BSA procedure. So, I think we're a little bit aligned on the intention, but the law has been written very broadly. And, I think what our concern is by giving a lot of power to the BSA, which is a completely mayoral-controlled body, and a lot of more power to the CPC, the City Planning Commission, which is still, the mayor has 7 of 13, the majority of the commissioners. You've essentially given the mayor a lot more power over changes that could really be impactful in the neighborhood without guardrails that really ensure that we're really prioritizing truly affordable housing, and we're not increasing gentrification. We're not really changing neighborhood character in a way that can displace even homeowners. So that's a major concern for us, these proposals.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple questions.
Can I just make one?
Yes. Oh yes, John, please do.
So I'm trying not to argue back and forth, but a point of clarification on what it takes to qualify for the BSA fast track is that you have to be a housing development fund company, which is the state-created entity that serves as the vehicle for all publicly financed affordable housing projects in the state. And so there really is no way that you'd be able to go through the BSA fast track unless you are a publicly financed affordable housing project. One of the findings is basically a letter of support from the government entity that is funding the project. And so it really does not provide anywhere near that loophole. And while you're correct, it doesn't strictly define area median income in the charter itself. When public dollars come into a project, we've listed in the final report of the Charter Revision Commission what that means for projects. They're going to be the types of projects that hit those low AMIs that have the homeless set-asides and things like that. So, if you look at the last 100 HDFC projects supported by the city, that would provide assurances this is the type of project that this action would enable, deeply affordable housing for the folks who need it the most.
I mean, that's not exactly what the law says, but I agree with John that seems to be the intent. I think the problem is the lack of guardrails, and when you don't have guardrails, and things can be interpreted various different ways. When we see what's happening with executive power in this country and in this city. So again, our concern is around the guardrails and the lack of specificity in the law, and the way that now the BSA has a lot of power that is way beyond anything it had before.
Yeah, I mean, we use the language for HDFCs from the state that already exists in the charter for it. So, We got a lot of lawyers on this thing, including me, and that's an airtight requirement for an HDFC.
And I have one question for Paris too. What about, could you give a little history of the member deferment, or I'm not sure if I have the exact terminology.
Member deference.
Deference, excuse me. Yes. From what I understand, and we're in Astoria here, and we're in the homeland of Peter Vallone Sr., who had a lot to do with creating the city council and its power within the land use process. And in those days, though, I'm not sure that they had this, each particular council person in the ability to control basically, what's building within his district. Is that something that's developed over the years? Was it something that was an original part of the Vallone's plan? And is there any thoughts towards modifying that to allow for the whole process to be freed up a little bit and maybe take a more holistic view of developments for the whole city?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, member deference has evolved, more as a tradition than a policy over the years. And it's worked in different ways under different speakers. That said, just taking a look at what member deference actually is and then how it's worked recently. Member deference is this idea that the local council member knows that local community the best, and therefore is best positioned to negotiate those local projects on behalf of the local community. And I can tell you right now, working here, I've been here 3 years, so it's not been that long, but if every council member had a say in every local project, it would be a complete disaster. But it's not at the same time that the local council member has the total and only say either. It's really a collaboration that at least this council, how it operates, and my understanding is how this council operated that way last council session as well, before 2022. But the speaker, the leadership team, the chair of land use, the chair of the zoning committee, if it's a zoning matter, and we're largely talking about zoning, a lot of council members actually are already involved, and there's not just one council member calling the shots for their local project. However, that local council member is expected to, be the leader, and because they are expected to really represent that local community. And you see that by the amount of projects that have where the councils had to override a local member. They're very few in the last 10 years. Yet, if you look at this council, we've approved 130,000 units of housing since 2022. And we've approved projects in neighborhoods that produce a lot of housing, and we've approved projects in neighborhoods that don't produce a lot of housing. A lot of reasons that more projects aren't proposed in areas that should have housing is, lack of transit access, market conditions where the market's just not as strong there. And I'm not going to say that there's not politics too. I mean, local communities definitely can oppose housing projects in some of those communities, but oftentimes developers make the choice, as opposed to the local council member, to not deal with that opposition. So it's not completely fair to say that the council is the obstacle. It's hard to, if you're a developer, you want the community with you most of the time.
Thank you. Jeremy, the new structure that would come into place, can you give examples of where it would make a difference more? You gave some in terms of some of the homeless shelters and things like that, but how about more about the larger developments and things like that, where the process, one of the issues I think we've had here in Community Board 1 is that we've probably had 10 rezonings that I can think of, a decent size, but probably we've actually had 1 or 2 actually built. And the most recent one, even the Durst project, which was done in 2010, is just really going online the last couple of years. So how do you think that this process could help expedite these projects? We go through a lot of work on the community board itself. I was on the land use committee for 25 years, to make decisions, to work on these projects. And then it's very frustrating to see them not move ahead. We just had a recent one also when we had a big project, Innovation Queens.
Mm-hmm.
It took an extremely large amount of work, and the major developer just pulled out.
Yeah.
So do you see that there's a role in these initiatives to try and make these developments that we're working on a reality?
Yeah. I remember Innovation Queens really well because I was working with the Congressman's office when that was being proposed, and it was a lot. From what I understand, and John can correct me if I'm wrong here, these proposals are really focused on the approvals process, and there's not much in them that would, take effect outside of that. So, like, once something is approved, from what I understand, right, these ballot proposals don't do anything in terms of like getting it shovels in the ground. It's more so the approval process to get it approved in the first place.
Yeah, but I think that there's a financial side to it too. And wouldn't you agree that if you can cut the costs for getting these approvals done, you're going to make the whole project more financially feasible? When you're spending millions of dollars to go through a ULURP process, and
I would agree with that. I mean, I've seen some stats that say things like, the approval process, if it takes a long time, can add up to $82,000 in costs per unit that you're doing. That's just stuff I've seen. I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate or not, but what we do know for sure is that the process is really expensive and can be really time consuming. People can spend millions of dollars just on the approval process as it exists right now. And one of the problems with that too, right? Like you talk about Innovation Queens, you talk about One LIC, Hudson Yards, right? These like big mega projects. It's like all that's getting talked about these days seems like it's like huge, mega, giant proposals. And it's not everything that's being proposed, of course, but one of the reasons why there is so much like huge luxury development going on is that oftentimes those are the only developers that can afford to go through the process. Not all the time, but if you have millions of dollars to spend and you can afford to wait a bunch of years, that's not going to be a lot of the smaller community organizations like Chaya CDC, for example, which operates in Jackson Heights and does great work around immigration and housing with South Asian communities and Southeast Asian communities. They've wanted to build more affordable housing forever, and they found it very difficult in the current process to be able to do that for the kind of things they want to do, which are like 4 or 5 story multifamily unit kind of things. And then at the same time, you see a lot of the new stuff that's getting built as like studios and 1-bedrooms because it's just better bang for your buck when you're spending so much money on an approvals process like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Question for both. How do we balance faster decision making with democratic accountability? I think that's really a lot of this is coming down to. So if I could get your input, Jeremy and Paris and John, as to that, because that's really, I think, the crux of the matter.
Yeah, I'm happy to start here. I mean, I think it is really the crux of the matter for sure, because there's no getting around it. I mean, Props 2 and 3 do remove a council vote on certain types of housing, right? And it goes to the City Planning Commission, the Board of Standards and Appeals instead. And so, that one is definitely a pretty controversial choice. I mean, it's why we're sort of here tonight too. I mean, for me, it just kind of comes down to the idea that we really support what our city council members do. And we think they have a very big role in this system to play. But there are some kinds of affordable housing development that just make a lot of sense. And maybe we don't need to vote on every single one. I couldn't really say one is better than the other, right? That's sort of a choice for voters to make. But I think in the face of the urgency and the scale of the crisis, it is something worth considering. Like maybe we do want to speed this up. And if that does mean that the full council is not voting on every single kind of proposal, maybe that helps alleviate this crisis, right? Which again is kind of the central conversation here that we're having is like, that's a choice that each individual voter can make. I mean, I'm obviously voting yes on these, so I feel like it's worth it in these cases. And I know that in, the cases that are not covered under Props 2 and 3, the system remains the same. So, we have the full ULURP process for office buildings, casinos, all that kind of other stuff too. And that for these specific types of affordable housing developments, I personally think it's worth it, but that's a choice for individual people to decide on.
Paris?
Well, something I want to clarify with these proposals is none of these proposals make things as of right.
Mhm.
And, unlike City of Yes, where now things that would adhere to City of Yes are as of right. And certainly when something is as of right, you're taking a lot of time, cost off the table. And I think that's a good thing, which is why the council approved City of Yes. However, these proposals are talking about cutting. The council's review period is 50 days. And with the pre-development of a project where you go through design and even approvals that even you have to go through for as of right, like building permits, etc., it takes a couple years at least usually to put up a building. We're talking about 50 days. So from a timeline standpoint, I don't buy at all that this is actually fast tracking anything. The other thing is from an expense standpoint, what causes most of the expense is the time and the requirements of the process. And at least from my understanding, for ELURP, which again is just cutting out the council, it's the same process. It's just you're cutting off those 50 days. So it's the same expense. For BSA, I think there is some maybe additional savings, but you still have to provide a lot of documentation to BSA, which costs money, and there is time associated with that. So I don't think that it's going to be a big cost savings. Part of the value of the local city council member on projects, even affordable projects, is the city comes in and has a program that's citywide, and it doesn't look at local individual neighborhoods. And what a lot of the local council member does is say, well, that doesn't work for our neighborhood because we need deeper affordability. And a lot of what I've seen in the last 3 years is we've taken rents on these projects down, from one level to another level. And it's not something that's initially proposed because it makes the projects more expensive, but sometimes that affordability is critical for that local neighborhood. In other cases, it means that the project might change from a rental project to a homeownership project, which again is the priority of that local community. And I think our concern with removing that local council member is that citywide priorities don't always map really great onto local communities. And just having the ability to dialogue and negotiate makes a big difference and actually makes for better projects.
I think that these are great points that everybody is making here. I do think there are significant cost savings in a few different areas. Like the BSA, not having to come to city planning for pre-cert and for all the time it takes you to do full ULURP. And also undersung here is if you do environmental review for rezoning, you basically have to analyze the full range of things that a rezoning allows. If you're rezoning to a commercial district or a manufacturing district or MX district, it can be anything in the world. It could be residential, it could be manufacturing, it could be commercial. And that environmental review is way more complicated, takes more time, and costs more money. The BSA action for publicly financed affordable, all you got to analyze is that project. It's like, here it is, 100 units of affordable housing. You don't have to analyze what if it becomes a factory or what if it becomes an office building or whatever. And that streamlines significantly, saves a lot of time, a lot of money, specifically for publicly financed affordable housing. For other stuff, the difference from a full 7-month ULURP to 90 days ELURP is, I would think, a little bit greater than Paris describes, but that's just the charter piece. We have not talked tonight about green fast track, that is, changes to environmental review where that makes sense. Our efforts at city planning in order to really, really streamline pre-cert. So this is all one part of a complete and balanced breakfast of things that that folks are trying to do in order to lower costs, in order to create more development. I personally, Paris, thank you for your kind words. Right back at you. We've worked together for so long collaboratively on a lot of this stuff. I love it when everybody can work together with city council to get to yes on projects. But there really is a significant portion of the city where you can't even get to that point where you're talking about projects or negotiating with projects. And so I think that aside from the process costs we've been talking about, wanted to create pathways in parts of the city that have said, no, thank you. We're just going to say no to everything. We're going to sue you for trying to put these questions on the ballot. That's an issue as well. I have no problem with the council members negotiating to get to yes, but there are some who won't even start the conversation.
Good. Thank you, John. Paris, from what I understand, you have a hard stop at 7:45. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have another presentation tonight.
Okay.
They keep me
I have
busy.
a bunch of more questions, but I don't think at this point, I think what we need to do is, could everybody give a little wrap up and also contact information, letting people know if they want to do further research before they walk into that voting booth, what tools are out there, what they can use, at least to maybe to espouse the position that you happen to be representing. So we could start with Jeremy.
Well, actually, do you mind if I go first? Because
okay.
I'm going to jump as soon as I'm done. I'd love to see you, Jeremy and John, but I had to jump. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity again. Just to write the contact information first, we have a website which describes some of at least our position and some of what I think is not.
Excuse me for 1 second, Victor or the host, could you please put this information in the chat so people can see it? Victor, if you could do that, I appreciate that. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's fairly easy. Thanks, Richard. It's www.whatsonmyballot.nyc. So www.whatsonmyballot.nyc. So that's our. You can get more information from the council there. City council is pretty easy to contact. So if you want to find me or any of your local council member, I think that's pretty easy to do. I just want to leave with the statement that, look, we want to and we need to build more housing. This is a very pro-housing council. There are very few council members that are anti-housing. There are some, I acknowledge that, and they can be a problem. But the majority of council members want to build more housing. They want to find more solutions to do so. What we do not want to do is undermine democracy in doing so. And even when you're in a housing crisis, you have to be careful about, or any crisis, you have to be careful about what processes you're changing or what rights you're taking away from the citizens and the voters. And I think, our concern is about the lack of representation now that that citizens will have through local council members, and some of the lack of guardrails of what kind of projects will qualify to get expedited and go around the local council members' decision making. So again, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you tonight.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. Thanks a lot, Paris.
See you, Paris.
Thanks, Paris.
Thank you. And Jeremy, if by the way, I have a few quick questions before we go through that. I know that Paris had to leave quickly. Do you think there's a role? This is something I've often thought, that historically developers usually get accused of being bad actors. They get accused of a lot more than that on occasion. But one thing I never hear is the role of the lending institutions, and I don't know if there's a place in this process where some of that can be addressed, where some of the people that, as far as I'm concerned, really control this process more than anybody else, can be made to contribute to the solution for our housing issues. This is something beyond beyond a little bit of this particular vote, but I always think it's something that nobody ever addresses.
Yeah, it's something I'm honestly not very familiar with, so I'm not sure if I could answer the question, Richard. But it's interesting for sure, and I would love to know the answer to that as well. But unfortunately, I don't know if I'm able to answer that tonight.
Okay, John.
I'm sorry, I don't have an answer right now.
Okay, just curious. It's something
the role of financial institutions.
You're talking about?
The role of financial institutions.
Yeah, in other words,
I mean, it's true. So
a lot of developers I know, they've told me that they've come in and they've tried to do certain community givebacks and this and that. And
it's true.
You get the loans.
It's true. I mean, this comes up a lot where sometimes it seems like it's just like, the city planning commission and a developer, or a city council and a developer negotiating with each other. But there's like a 800-pound gorilla in the room as well, which is like, if a developer agrees to a certain thing, is he or she going to be able to get a loan in order to build that project? And, where it might be easy for a developer trying to get through ULURP to say, yes, I'll do this thing. If you go to the underwriter at the financial institution and they say, this doesn't pencil or this carries too much risk, then you're not going to be able to get a loan in order to build the project in order to satisfy that requirement in the first place. So, I mean, I'm very familiar with this from, over 10 years ago now, when we were trying to design the mandatory inclusionary housing program and do the feasibility analysis behind that, where we hired financial consultants and we talked to everybody in New York City about all these factors that go into financial feasibility. And, we were scared to death that if you make the wrong set of policy decisions, that you're creating a program that no one will be able to use, that will produce nothing. Where everybody gets together on the day you pass it, shakes hands and has a big signing ceremony, and then you get 0 units of affordability. So that's a huge thing. And you see it in the commercial realm as well, where why are all these retail spaces empty? Why don't they just lower the rent to a point where you can occupy it with something, anything that will create, action on this commercial street. Often it's because, the loan agreements with the lenders will say you're not allowed to lease a space for below a certain amount or you're in default of that loan. And so that's another way that in a non-residential context, that the 800-pound gorilla, the financial institutions that are absolutely necessary to this process, but that, don't get caught in these political fights necessarily, they're important as well. So I think it's a very good point, Richard.
Yeah, it's something that we've had, like I said, a lot of major ULURPs and rezonings done in this district, and very few of them actually been acted upon. And most of the time when we've investigated, and we've been told it was because they couldn't get the funding.
Yeah, I mean,
they wanted to do these things and couldn't get it. So maybe we need to bring back Occupy Wall Street. I don't know.
You mentioned Innovation Queens. I know there was some trouble there from shortly before. I mean, maybe it was my early days at city planning, Hallett's Point. It was before mandatory inclusionary housing, but the Astoria Cove, sorry. Astoria Cove. City planning was trying to do some sort of proto MIH there before we had all the feasibility analyses, and oops. So but you're absolutely right that if it doesn't pencil, the underwriter's going to know that, and you're not going to be able to get a loan, and it's going to just remain, tumbleweed and vacant land.
No, I'll tell you, that's my 2 cents. I drive past too many green boards here, and they just sit for years and years and years and years and years. And, I just waiting for the politician or somebody to really address that. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. But let's go back to the last question we had. Okay, if you finalize, Jeremy, if you could start.
Sure. So just final closing thoughts kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think my final closing thoughts are very simple, right? I think the urgency of the crisis paired with the simple lack of affordable housing makes a very clear point and clear argument for the fact that we have to do something in order to speed up the process. And these proposals, are not the magic bullet. These are not a silver, bullet that's going to just like overnight change our entire city. but they are tools in a toolbox that will allow us to address the crisis in multiple ways. And the City of Yes was a great thing. It really helped to start things moving in the right direction. We see these ballot proposals as just additional things that we can now add on to that in order to fulfill the promise of making an affordable city for everyone. Because like was mentioned earlier too, in addition to our working families having to leave New York City because they can't afford it, that's just a negative impact on the city generally, because this is a city for everyone. But it also carries implications for the census cycle in 2030, when we could end up losing more congressional representation if people cannot afford to live and stay in the city that they want to live in. So altogether, we think this is I think this is a very compelling reason to vote yes on Props 2, 3, 4, and 5. I should say that Prop 5 in particular is one of my favorites. I love having a digital map. I think we should totally have it. It's non-controversial as far as I've seen it. So the only person who opposes it is Curtis Sliwa. And, if you like Curtis Sliwa, cool, but, he likes paper maps, apparently, not digital maps. But I think for everything else, these are no-brainers, and we should definitely vote yes on these. And our website, our website is yesonaffordablehousing.com.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. And John?
The Charter Commission's website, the most useful one there is just charter.nyc. And it explains all the ballot questions in as much detail as you would like. Love Paris. I got to say that what's on the ballot website, I saw the ads that they're putting out today. It looked like the ads for like the Saw movies, the horror, the horror movies where it's like, whoa, what's going on here? I don't think of our questions in that light at all. I think of our questions as an earnest effort of a number of city luminaries who've been around the block for decades to try to address a couple of the most pressing issues that the city faces right now, around the housing crisis and around the climate crisis. I agree with Jeremy that these will not lead to a revolution in the way things work in New York City. They are intended to preserve ULURP for what it is today. It works great for most projects, but just to expand that pipeline a little bit to include types of projects or projects in certain areas of the city that can't happen today. In the main, City Council will remain the final decision maker on land use decisions. But I love using this phrase, ULURP today is one size fits all. It's always thrown at me, but I can say it back, is one size fits all. And if we, for certain types of modest projects, if we right size the procedure there, then we can get those types of things too, as part of our effort to address the housing shortage and the climate crisis. And so, I hope people will flip their ballot, learn about these proposals, and vote their conscience.
Okay, thank you, guys. This is a great, very informative session. We're so happy to be actually running our meetings again too. It's great to have the outreach again. We took about a year off, but now we're back. And hope to have you guys come back soon. Maybe after the election, maybe I'd love to hear from you for a few minutes if you want to pop in and let us know what you think of the results. And maybe we can build upon those results, whichever way they go. I know that OANA is not taking a position on this. We're here to try and bring out information and different points of view as much as we can to our local communities so they can make informed decisions. So that's our goal. And again, thank you very much for helping us realize that. Okay, have a good night.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Richard. Take care.
Good night. And now, everyone, I hope that you learned a little bit out of that, and you can, when you go vote, you can feel comfortable that you made the right decision, at least for your personal needs and your personal perspectives. I'd like to bring out now somebody who's just taken over what's a very consequential institution in Queens, the Queens Economic Development Corporation. Ben Guttman, if you'd come out. I know that we've had some discussions ourselves. We hope to be working directly with you guys because one of our mission statements is the economic and cultural health of our community. So we look forward to working closely with QEDC in order to realize those goals. So Ben, I'd like you to introduce yourself to your community and also explain a little bit of what QEDC does and some of your goals.
Absolutely. Let me see if I can share part of my screen here. Okay, let's see. I have a window, and I'll do this one. Okay. Is that coming in? Let's see.
Hey, Victor or Michael, you want to help them out? There you go. Good.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Richard. You know, I'll preface this with saying I have a 15-month-old daughter. This is actually her crib over here, and so her bedtime is coming up very fast. So I'm gonna go relatively quickly and hopefully be able to get through kind of an introduction here. But as you mentioned, I'm honored to be here, not just as the director of QEDC, but also as your neighbor. I live in Sunnyside. I lived in Long Island City for 10 years. I've been in Sunnyside the last 3 years, and my wife and I walk over to Astoria, and we go to Brooklyn Bagel there pretty much every weekend. So just wanted to be here. But QEDC is, as you mentioned, kind of it's big shoes to fill at QEDC. So my predecessor was Seth Bornstein, who I know many folks know and love, and myself included. Seth retired at the end of June after a celebrated tenure where he was director for 16 years. And prior to that, he was a board member. Prior to that, he was a staff member since 1979. So 46 years for the most part, a couple of years off here and there. But it was big shoes to fill. But he was very gracious with the transition, and we're still keeping him on as a consultant to be able to help kind of pull some of those things out of his brain as we're going through all the different paperwork and everything else. But a little bit about QEDC. So I'm excited to join tonight also because one thing I want to do is be out there individually to introduce myself as the new director, but also to reintroduce QEDC to the community and kind of explain all the wonderful stuff that we get. Because what happened a lot in the last few months as I've been going around, as people have been saying, "Oh, I love QEDC, but what do you guys do?" Right? They know Seth, they know Rob, they know Victor, they know somebody on the team, they know one or two of our programs, but they don't know the full kind of breadth of everything that we do. And we're a 25-ish person organization, depending on how you count it. We have a few physical assets that we do work out of across the borough. We really touch a lot of different pieces of work here. And so let me just move this window around so I can see at the same time. But we've been around for almost 50 years. So since 1977, I like to say our goal is to grow the Queens economy. We're in the business of making Queens thrive. We did that through kind of three major branches. We do business services, neighborhood development, and tourism marketing. I'm going to get to each one of those in a second, but to give you a sense of the scale here, in any given year, we tend to serve about 1,100 different clients across the borough. We hold 130 classes. We hold events that attract around 3,000 people in total. So we're pretty busy, and we're doing a lot of really interesting stuff. The bread and butter of what we do is in the business services category. Right? So just to clarify, because the other question that I get a lot is, how are you different than the chamber, right? And the chamber, good friends of ours, I see Tom all the time. We do a lot of collaborations with them. But the chamber, they're a membership organization. So you are a business owner, you have your restaurant, you have your law firm, whatever it is. You join the chamber and you pay your dues and you have membership events and whatnot. And there's some degree of programming, but that's a little bit less of their main focus. We're a programs-based organization. You can't be a member of QEDC. It's all, we serve the entire kind of Queens economy. The only thing you pay for in the entire organization is rental space at the commercial kitchen, which we'll talk about in a second. But the bread and butter is the business services in terms of counseling and education. So counseling is if you have a pizza place you want to open up in Corona, you have a barbershop you want to open up in Astoria, you have a nail salon you want to open up in Far Rockaway, you can call us up. You can talk to an expert advisor in taxation and marketing and strategy, in licenses and MWBE certification, all these different things that are totally free. And you can talk to them for both advice and for technical assistance. We help people register businesses. And so that's something we do, hundreds and hundreds of times a year at these different counseling sessions. The education component I mentioned, we do about 130 classes a year. And these are range from one-off workshops and to ongoing like 16-week courses that we run with different programs. So they cover things from AI, they cover things including home improvement contractor training. We did them, I would say the majority are in English, but we do offer classes in Spanish, Mandarin, and occasionally a few other places as well, a few other languages as well. But business services also encompasses a few different kind of specialty programs that we run that are really exciting things. The first one here on the left, entrepreneur space, this is in Astoria, right? This is just south of Kaufman. You mentioned Innovation Queens, it's like right just outside the boundary of where that would have been. This program, we've been doing it for 15 years. It is a 24/7, 6,500 square foot commercial kitchen where we have makers that do everything from hot sauce to hummus, from chocolate to croissants to meal kits and to dog treats, right? Like we do everything kind of under the sun in those 15 years. We've had 820 different makers come through. The idea is we take somebody from, if they have a dream and they're making it in their home and kitchen, to being something that is sellable in a market, that is something that could be on Shark Tank, which we've had people there. We could be on at Walmart and Whole Foods. Go onto your own restaurant, go onto a co-packer. This is really an incredible facility, and we do all of this at about 30 to 40% cheaper than for-profit commercial kitchens. So if you or anybody you know wants to start a food business, needs to get into like a fully licensed, fully equipped, fully inspected kitchen, let me know. This is a wonderful, wonderful, I think really special program in the city. Mangin Queens. This is something that in many ways, a lot of the makers that come from the entrepreneur space become a part of this. This is our marketing and certification program for products that are designed or produced in Queens. This, frankly, we had this for a long time, and it got a little stale. We hadn't done as much kind of investment in this program. We're in the middle of rebooting it right now. We have new branding for it. We have a new website for it. And we're currently recertifying all of our makers, and we're attracting a few new folks. My dream with this is to eventually get back to a retail presence. And so if you're familiar in Brooklyn, they have the Brooklyn Made stores. We very briefly had a Made in Queens store right before the pandemic and didn't do so hot for obvious reasons. But we would love to, we're exploring options all across the borough to try to get more of a physical presence for Made in Queens. And then the third one here is the Queens Tech and Innovation Challenge, which is currently underway. We're recruiting new businesses, new early stage businesses and startups to be a part of this. We've done this for also about 15 years. This annual competition, the carrot is that we give people up to $20,000 a year up to $20,000 each in seed funding. It adds up to about $100,000 we give away. And this is also, though, kind of a Trojan horse to get people into education, get people into business plan consultations, to get people into networking. So we're not just giving them the check; we're giving them all the resources they need to be able to kind of thrive in their business. So these programs are really special, and they're all currently kind of at different levels of engaging right now. If you're interested in participating.
Good.
Richard.
Sorry?
Were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, I had a few questions. Thank you for the overview. It's great. Yeah. And I did actually check out recently the space with the different food vendors, and I did walk away with a very, very wonderful Iranian Turkish hors d'oeuvre dip.
Oh, yeah. Great. And the thing is, we just had an open house there, which was on September 17th, I think. Mm-hmm. That was the first one we had since before the pandemic, right? And so I'm perfectly candid about this program, which is a very expensive program to run, right? It's we have ovens that are $125,000. We have a dishwasher that's $45,000. We've got a mix, an industrial size mixer at $75,000. It's stuff that you can't get in your home kitchen. and it's so that you can make 200 batches of cookies at a time.
Mhm.
The problem, though, is that when those things break, it's like an $8,000 repair bill. It's not going to Home Depot and getting like a little washer or something. It's a very expensive, complicated program to run, and we're always looking for ways to make that work. But I think despite how difficult it is to make work, I think it's a really wonderful asset, and I want to make sure we have it on a sustainable path going forward. So I'm glad you were able to come to the open house.
Yeah, well, that was, there's no better place to have a food-based market like that than in Astoria, which to me has the best food in Queens anyways, maybe New York, but that's my opinion.
Absolutely.
A couple of questions for you. What are some of the major economic trends that you're observing now in Queens in general? What do you see that's hot, that's working? Where do you see issues in terms of problems?
Got it. Actually, I still have a few more slides that I can go through that might cover some of those things, but to answer that real quick, the issues that I hear are they're not super surprising. They're right now. There's two large things. Queens, about 11.9% of people in Queens work directly or indirectly in the tourism economy. So we have the two major airports. We have the fourth busiest train station in America, at the fourth busiest in North America, at Jamaica. We have huge economies related to the airports. Even in Long Island City, Astoria, there's food, importer exporters. There's the commercial kitchens like ours. With tariffs, it's a huge issue for a lot of these businesses. They're getting shellacked of them. And then number two is because we've created an unwelcoming environment for international visitors, we're seeing declines across those things. I was looking at the tourism, NYC Tourism and Conventions. They have a dashboard, and international spending on credit cards is down 2.3%. It's usually up a couple percent. It's down 2.3% in the last year, year over year. International visits, crossings from Canada are down 30% year over year. I think Mexico's around 20%. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it's pretty big when you see that. And the other big challenge also, it stems from a federal issue, is, and I got to say, this is a good segue back into some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Market in Corona Plaza. You can kind of see it in the background of this photo here. This vendor market is, was something that was informal, and we were kind of brought in by DOT to make this a little bit more of a formalized market. Today we had to shut the market down because there was fear of ICE raids, at the market with both the vendors and the customers. And so this is one of those things where we're seeing pretty suppressed economic activity in Jackson Heights and Corona and these areas, which we do some services on the ground. And so, that's that. You talk about the food economy of Queens, like if that doesn't happen about immigrants, right? And so we're working right now, kind of elected partners, government partners, to see what we can do. But that's unfortunately the big reality we're facing here.
That sounds like a huge challenge.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll segue back into this, and we'll go back to.
Mm-hmm.
So in the community development, we kind of do two buckets here. We do neighborhood development, which in many ways we act as like a bid light, is how I like to describe it. Is we augment the services that other agencies might provide. We run a couple of programs on the ground, and for instance, we're doing stuff in Astoria right now too. And we have a reentry program. It's a reentry program is we work with formerly incarcerated or system impacted folks for different cohorts. This one, we do work in the fashion and tailoring space. This is actually located also in Astoria, right above the kitchen in the same building that we did this program here. But to this end, though, about what our kind of current suite of neighborhood development projects are, I mentioned Astoria. We're in year 3 of an SBS grant for Neighborhood 360, which is focused on supporting Astoria storefronts. I know, Victor Prado from our team has been in, also has a young baby as well. He's been great, an exceptional leader on that project over the last 3 years, and we're looking forward to some more work in the neighborhood. But I mentioned Corona Plaza.
We were actually privileged to help out on that project a little bit. And while we have a second, Victor Prado, if you could just say hello, because Victor does work for QEDC, but he's also been a volunteer for OANA for how many years now, Victor?
I think last time we tried to come up with a number, it was 2017.
Wow.
So it's been a long time, and he's been a great partner, and he's a great addition to the community, and we're looking forward to great things from him.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the kind words.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really cool project. Victor's been killing it, and we're excited to continue working in Astoria. The work in Corona Plaza I mentioned before. Diversity Plaza is the other area where we kind of have a big active on-ground presence. This is Jackson Heights. This is a new project. It's with SBS also for merchant organizing. We'll see where this develops over the next year or so, but we have we're working on creating a bit of a merchant association there, doing some events, some beautifications. And then across the borough, we do events all the time. We partner with local groups. We sponsor different events, either as a separate sponsor or a fiscal conduit for a number of things. We help with events like the Queens Night Market. I'm in Sunnyside. We work with Sunnyside Shines and some stuff. And we do stuff at down in Southeast Queens with Juneteenth. We help support a big event down there every year. And so, across the borough, holiday lighting, special events, murals, etc. This is something we work with local partners to make happen. And one of the things that we do kind of everywhere too is like a bid light type service. It's graffiti removal, and we've done this for a long time. Every year, the makeup of the map is a little bit different. This year, we have I think all but 4 or all but 5 of the council districts in the borough have given us funding to provide graffiti removal services. Last year, they added up to 129 sites across Queens. And so this is one of those things that's always a big win because there's a really good before and after for the work that you're doing with removal. And the last big bucket is the tourism marketing piece, right? So I mentioned how big the tourism economy is here in Queens. We have the second most number of hotel rooms of any borough. We have, again, the busiest international airport in the world. We've got a really incredible suite of cultural institutions, especially in Astoria and Long Island City. So we're really bullish on tourism. We've done it for a long time. Part of my professional background is coming from the marketing side, where I worked in tourism for a bit. So this is something that personally is a passion of mine. It's great. It's a great economic development activity to do tourism because it's other people's money. I mean, that's really the thing that's the most important. So we run the Queens Tourism Council. We provide coordination, support, marketing for institutions across Queens. We just had our first meeting of my tenure at the Sculpture Center in LIC a couple weeks ago. And we're going to make this a more regular occurrence. We're going to be doing some different events. We're going to be doing some different campaigns. I've already been talking to a couple of funders about potential options. And of course, we manage It's in Queens, which is the tourism publication for the borough. This will be getting a little bit of a refresh in the coming year, but we have had a lot of traction with it over the years, so it's been really great. The events I mentioned, Victor has been a leader in organizing food crawls for us in Astoria. We're exploring a couple options in other parts of the borough too to help tap into that, that energy. We do influencer events. We work with Yelp a lot on some of their stuff, and community partnerships again, kind of everywhere across the borough. We also do Queen's Taste as we're the flagship, the oldest and largest culinary event in Queens. We've had last year we had over 500 people at this event. This photos from it. We've been doing it since 2004. So that's now there's a lot of other food events, but this is the original one. So and then finally you do advocacy. So this is a relatively new piece of the puzzle, or it's a newly defined piece of the puzzle. We've done this for a long time, but I'm trying to be a little bit more deliberate about how we go out there and advocate for the Queens economy and for the borough as a whole, be a cheerleader, a champion for the businesses here and for policies and projects that make sense. So, to that end, I'm going around bragging a lot, right? And so I get to talk about how, we have a GDP that's bigger than about 130 nations, $133 billion economy. It's about the same size as Slovakia, which is, EU country, and very funny. And funny enough, my former business partner is from Slovakia, and he is now a trade representative for Slovakia. So now I get to brag that Queens is about this. Queens as an individual county, is bigger than his country. We have 2.4 million residents, which is more than 15 states. The busiest international airport, 107 subway, rail, and ferry stops. That means that over 50% of people in Queens who commute do so by foot or by bike or by transit, right? 14,000 hotel rooms, I mentioned, is the second most in the city. And of course, this is all without even saying about the diversity that is the real ultimate trump card for what makes Queens the best place in the world. By some measures, it's 800 languages, some measures it's 190 languages or 360 languages. The number always changes, but whatever it is, we are the most diverse community on the planet. We have, over half of our population speaks a language other than English. Around the same population is born outside of the U.S. We have, because of this, we have the best food, we have the best views, we have the best beaches, we have the best cultural institutions, and we have the best neighborhoods anywhere in the world. And so I'm excited to go out and tell the story of Queens as a Queens boy myself, and I'm, really, excited to be in this role. If there's anything, just the last little piece here. If anybody wants to reach out, this is our info here. There's the website, phone number. Victor's always around. I'm always around. And Richard knows how to get a hold of me anytime. But we're looking forward to doing a lot of really exciting things in the next few years here. And I'm excited to do it with our friends and neighbors in Astoria, and to continue taking over the world.
Yeah, great, good. Well, we look forward to working with you as we worked with you on the SBS project here in Astoria, and we look forward to working on our proposed arts district and also winter activation in Astoria Park. That's a couple of our projects that we're looking at establishing, and we hope that we can work together to make them a reality. And Vic, before we go, Victor, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I just want to thank the kind words, Ben and Richard. Thank you so much. I do have a very rare opportunity where, as a Queens boy myself, also grew up on Long Island. Astoria is my Queens home, so I do have a very unique and rare opportunity to serve a community that I was raised in. And so I don't take that for granted, and I really pour my heart into things. And so I'm just really glad I have this opportunity to serve, and I will continue to do so. So thank you very much, everybody.
Good. And it's great to have you. So, and you've been a great addition to OANA. So, okay. Let me see. If there's any questions? No, other than that, I think at this time it's 8:20. So I know it's been a couple hours, and people are that haven't had a chance to eat yet. I know that they want to eat, or they want to put their babies to bed, right? I think we got a couple of that too. So we really appreciate everybody joining us tonight. And I also want to give a special shout out to Michael, who is acted as our host. Michael, are you around? Can you say hello? There he is. Mike, thanks a lot. You've been big help for OANA over the last couple of years. And we fully expect to be doing continuous programs. If anybody has anything they would like to discuss, last month we had our first meeting with the Port Authority. We were talking about the installation of lithium batteries up by the airport for energy storage. This month we're talking about economic development and also ballot initiatives. The next month, who knows at this point, we will be sending out information. If anybody wants to get on our mailing list, just go to our website and put in their email address. I'd again like to thank Paris Straughter, Jeremy Parkin, and John Mangin for joining us on that very informative program on the vote. Remember, guys, this Saturday, the voting starts. So meet your obligations and vote. Okay. And with that, everybody have a great night. Appreciate
Good night, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm.